the trouble with trouble is it starts off as fun, as the quote goes. And so I basically, for the next 3 hours, watched my mom almost die.
After a 10-year stint as a software engineer, Colleen Miniuk fled the gray cubicle walls to pursue a more colorful, meaningful life as a photographer, author, publisher, instructor, speaker, stand-up paddleboarder, and river rafter. When she's not paddling or chasing bubbles, she's writing books, answering questions on her Dear Bubbles advice column, and leading photography workshops, women's photography retreats called Sheography, and online presentations for camera clubs, outdoor organizations, and private clients across the U.S. Find out more about Colleen at ColleenMiniuk.com. That's ColleenMiniuk.com. Now on to the episode with wild woman Colleen Miniuk. Let's go. And action. Okay, for the audience, it always counts down. And so Colleen was like miming 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Action, right?
Let's
like
do
we're
it.
on a movie with the thingy. What is that called? The little board that I don't even know anything about that. So
I have no idea, but it's the black and white thing. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Go.
The clicky do. The clicky
The
do.
clicky do. And we'll do it at the end and scene. I don't even think, do they really do that with the little, maybe they do.
I don't know. We should be movie stars. That's what we should do. And we should find out all of these things.
That's right. Well, maybe we already are movie stars by doing this. No, I'm just,
think so.
I'm just
We're
kidding.
Podcast stars.
I'm just kidding. Well, actually,
Radio stars.
Right, exactly. But you know what's really fun? You are an author. I mean, is this your first book? Have you put out any other books before, or is it's So Said the River, right? This is your book?
Yeah, so Said the River is my forthcoming memoir, and it's coming this summer, and it is my 6th title. It is my 8th published book. So I've published other people's books through my publishing company, NLMA Press. But up until this point, I've really only focused on technical writing. So all of the previous books have been guidebooks, and that is a very different approach between, providing how-to information to photographers versus pouring your entire life
Soul
onto the pages. Yeah, like grabbing your heart, ripping it out of your chest and throwing it onto a page and watching it bleed. And so this is my first memoir. It's my first, sort of major nonfiction in terms of storytelling. And it's taken 8.5. By the time it comes out, it'll be almost 9 years. And it has been an evolution. It's been a journey. It's been cathartic. It's been awful. It's been amazing. It's been everything. And I have tried to pour all of that into the story. And so I'm very, very excited for this kind of new venture.
And maybe even a little scary to put it all out there for the world to see,
It is. It's interesting because anytime you write a book, it becomes sort of your baby, right? And so letting it go, and I don't have kids, but I would imagine it's like this thing where you watch them go off to college and see what they're going to do out into the world. And so I have that sort of separation anxiety with every book that I write, because I try to put as much of my, put everything I have into these books. So it's a very emotional process. But this one, especially because it is such a personal story of my journey and transformation, it's a little bit terrifying to put your entire life out there. But, part of the whole reason I wrote the book is to give people confidence in who they are as people. And so over time, I have become more confident in the story. I've been more confident in myself. And, if people don't like it, great. I hope that people do like it. I mean, and we talk about this through photography as well. Just the process of writing it had value to me.
Yeah.
And in the same way that just simply going out and going through the process of being in the field and having these experiences is worth it enough. And what this project, what this book does out into the world is really not within my control. I mean, I want the message to be out there. I want everybody to hear it. Why, I want everybody to feel comfortable in their own skin and live their most fulfilling life. But ultimately, how people connect with the story, how it resonates with them, how they respond to it is actually not within my control. And that's the same thing with photography, right? Like, we hope that people like our work, and it takes a lot of courage and bravery to share our work with public audiences. But ultimately, not everybody's going to like what you do, and that doesn't mean that you should change it. It doesn't, I mean, you should take the feedback and do what you want with it. But you have to believe in your own path. You have to believe in your own self. And that's part of my journey. Is when I first started this book, I didn't have that confidence. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was going. I was, it was in a bad place. And through that process of writing the book, I gained that confidence. I gained a lot of knowledge and support. And you know we'll see what happens. I mean, it's the same thing with, I feel grateful that that I'm a photographer and we have these experiences, right? Where we've all put ourselves out there with the things that are important to us, the memories that are important to us. And over time, you've just got to be okay and comfortable with people not liking your work.
I know. I feel like it's okay. I totally feel like it's fine. I feel like it would be really weird and it would be a little bit robotic if, like, little Stepford wives moment, if everybody liked all your stuff and, if people liked everything, everyone liked everything you put out, it really wouldn't be, it wouldn't make us individuals, like I don't walk into, here's the thing, ultimately writing a book or doing putting out our images, photography work, it's all art. And so it would be weird if I walked into an art exhibition or an art in a gallery where there's all different kinds and I liked all of it. I mean, like,
Wouldn't that be creepy? It'd be creepy.
yeah, it would totally be. I mean, I can walk through and appreciate most of it. I can appreciate most of it, but like, I don't have to love all of it. Like, I don't have to, I don't even have to go think I want to buy it. But sometimes there's something, I mean, like, I have my art wall here. Like, these are all,
I got mine.
right? Like, there's some of them that just speak to you and you're like, oh, I need that. And with books, we just don't know until we read it and then we can make that decision. But either way, I think we can appreciate the story for the effort and the story's sake, right? And for the awfulness, you said, it, like, a lot of the awfulness in there, it just wouldn't be interesting without that. So I'm glad that you like.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But that's really hard to come to terms with as a perfectionist, and for me, a people pleasing perfectionist on no less. So, like, for me, I spent 40 years
Mhm.
believing that if I were perfect and if I made everybody else happy with the things that I was doing, which is hilarious, then they would grant me the keys to the kingdom of happiness. And so I spent a lot of time doing things that I thought society wanted me to do. And I lost my voice. I mean, I didn't have a voice. And that's part of the book. Is so said the river, is what the river reconnecting me with my own, sensibilities and my own interest and things like that. So it's hard to say that people aren't going to like everything in your gallery or everything in your exhibition or everything in your book, because that that was everything that I was living for before this process. But I think along the way we start to learn the difference, or at least I did, the difference between sort of a judgment and an opinion.
Mhm.
Just because you don't like every single piece of someone's work doesn't mean that they lack talent or they lack skill. It's just that you look through the world through a different lens, and that's okay. Like that's what makes us, like you said, like that's what makes it interesting, is that we are all looking at the world in a different way. We don't all have to agree. There are lots of right answers, and just because somebody doesn't like you doesn't mean you're not on the right path, or like your work, it doesn't mean you're not on the right path. It's just that they're on they're in a different world and they're in a different place, and that's awesome.
Right. Let's qualify right here. And I'm saying this in quotes,
Mhm.
meaning the thing that you're supposed to do, not something that everybody else thinks that you're supposed to do. Right. Which is what feels good when you go forth to do the work. I've had this too. I had this too when I was first,
Yeah.
when I got my first camera. I was like, oh, this is years ago when my kids were younger. And I'm like, if you have a big camera, you know, a big camera, you have to take pictures of people. Like that's what my
Oh,
brain,
interesting.
yeah, that's what my brain told me I was supposed to do. And then all of a sudden one day, I don't know what it was. I can't even remember the moment. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want people in my pictures. I want to photograph nature. And then I saw some other folks doing, and then I was like, oh, I don't know if I like, after doing some experimenting, I don't know if I like big wide angle stuff. What else is there? I mean, I still love it. I still like making, wide angle work. I know you do a lot of it and it's beautiful,
Mhm.
but I wondered if there was something different. And so when I saw some other photographers, like I'll mention Jennifer Renwick and Sarah Marino. They're both
Yeah.
amazing artists. But I saw them doing these smaller scenes, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's a thing. So seeing their work gave me permission to also do the thing. I really felt moved toward doing more of that. And like that was the quote. This is why I'm saying it is that was the quote right thing for me. And right.
Exactly.
And so the thing is like if we don't put our work out there, if we don't share it, other people might not feel like we don't know how it's going to influence people. Maybe your work, maybe your story is going to influence someone else to share or help them get on their own quote right path.
Right.
Right? So we just don't know. It is hard to be vulnerable though.
It is, and especially when we have, society like you're suggesting, like you had this thought in your brain, and it's probably because of something you saw or something else going on, and we make these assumptions, we develop these thoughts, and it's at some point you've got to start challenging, like why are you doing what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's for me, in 2015, when I had kind of two back to back quote failures, I was stripped of everything. I literally started dumping everything into the river, and it was like, why do I believe this? Why do I do this? Why am I doing that? Why am I a photographer? What, like, and I became you became this like 5-year old, right? Like it's like why, and when you start stripping that down, then you start getting to your own core. And I think even with social media today, you're talking about sharing, there is so much work out there, and there are so many voices out there, and they're awesome. But like, which ones do you listen to? It's like, you know, one will tell you that, wearing makeup is great one day, and the next day they say it, causes cancer. So like what do you listen to? And so most importantly, when it comes to especially our creative outlets, our creative pursuits, is listening to what your own curiosities, listening to your own interest. And yes, getting feedback and getting external, input is great, but why? What are you going to do with that information? What can you do with that information? Is it serving you well? Is it bringing you joy? Is it creating meaning? Maybe, I think we have this idea that everything's going to be joyful, and that's not the case, but you can create meaning out of anything. And so is it fulfilling in your own way? And for me, it's like when I was getting ready for my Lake Powell paddle in 2015, it's like you study the gear, right? And you're like, okay, I only have so much room on my stand-up paddleboard. do I have room for this? Do I have room for the Cheetos?
Yeah.
Do I have, I know the answer to that question is always yes.
Yes.
But do I have room for, 3 pairs of long johns? But it's the same thing in our lives. Like, do you have room for, this technique or this equipment or this idea or this approach? Do I have room for that? Do I want to make space for that? And if you're on your own path, the thing is nobody's going to tell you. And so part of it is just trying. And if you like it, keep doing it. If you don't like it, stop doing it. It's like what you went through.
Or do it in a different way. You know what I mean? If you decide you don't like it, is there a little part of it that you did? Keep that small part. Always it's about experimenting and trying. That's why I think you said failure in quotes, because
I did.
Because by the way, that she said failures in quotes, because it's all kind of, life is just all kind of a big experiment anyway. I mean, truthfully, some of them feel heavier and harder than others are experiments.
I know, right? Some are, yeah. Yeah, but again, as a perfectionist, that was really hard to come to terms with, is that there is a difference between failure and learning. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about giving your example about, photographing people, like you may not do that now, and that's awesome. But I'm guessing that those experiences enriched your life and in ways that are helping you today be a better photographer. And I photographed food for 3 years. I don't photograph food anymore, but I'm very particular about my photographs now because of that experience. And so I think that's the thing. Even if it doesn't work out, it's still benefiting you. Like it can still positively influence your work.
Right. Even if it doesn't work out the way we think it's supposed to. Right?
Expectations are the killer of joy, right? That's the quote.
Oh, though, I have a lot to say about expectations, but y'all have to just wait. I'm producing a zine called Releasing Expectations. This is the first time publicly I'm talking about it.
Oh, cool.
So y'all have
That's exciting.
I know.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I sent off some proofs to get printed, and I'll see. It's going to be digital and in print probably. But anyway,
excellent.
Y'all will have to wait to hear about that. So stay tuned. It has photographs in it. It'll be fun. Yeah.
And when does that come out? Shamelessly self-promote yourself on your own show. Go ahead.
When does it? I haven't decided. I think I'm going to put it out. Yeah, I know. Actually, I did write it down yesterday. I was putting it on my calendar, decide a date for XYZ release or whatever, because there's stuff leading up to it. And I'm like, why do I have to decide that? Why don't I just decide it now and skip the whole putting out that part on my calendar thing? So yeah, right. So I know this is going to be, I really want to talk about your experiences on the river, but here's what I'll say. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to do what photographers do not do. Okay. I'm taking all of my images off of my website, except for one big gallery. So I'm going to do gallery releases at a time, like artists do when they have exhibitions.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So
that's cool.
It'll be a run like 4 weeks where you can go and look at all of my images from a decent, either I'll have 2 collections at a time or one big collection from whatever collection that I share at a time. And you'll have like a month to just go check it out on my website for free. And then after that, you have to have the zine that goes with it to access it. So if you have the zine, then there'll be a link that you can go grab it. Anyway, then you can go check out.
Like an exhibition catalog. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you know why? Because I'm an artist.
No, good for you.
Everyone's going, oh my gosh, Brie, you're so crazy. So I'm just doing it differently.
That's awesome. I mean, you've got to figure out what works for you, and that sounds exciting, and you're excited about it, and yeah, go for it. Why not?
I know, it's just one of those experiments that we do just to see what happens, So I'm just curious. Yeah. So I'm going to try it.
Well, that's the key, is that you're curious. I mean, that's the key to life, is just constantly being curious, right?
I know. Well, I'm curious. Speaking of curiosity,
There you
I
go.
know. It's what I do. Curiosity is my job. So you talked about this paddle on Lake Powell. And I think you've teased us a little bit. I want to hear more stories from this. And there's some other things I want to hear about too. Did you go to do this did you have you had a camera at this time? You took your camera and you were doing photography, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So tell us more about that. But speaking of the awful, I really want to hear about something that went wrong during your trip.
Oh, where do we start? um, Yeah, well, so there's some important background, I think. The first is that I've been terrified of water where I can't see my feet for my entire life. So I hyperventilate. I don't snorkel. I don't scuba. I don't go in lakes. I don't swim. Like I was on the swim team, and like pools and baths and stuff are fine. But I had a left-hand turn in my personal life in April of 2015, and I was supposed to be somewhere exotic for my 40th birthday, and I was with my then husband, and I was not. I ended up teaching in Moab, and I had a morning free, and I decided to treat myself for my birthday because I was alone and I was miserable and I was sad, and so I ended up booking a stand-up paddleboard on the Colorado River for a half a day in Moab, and I didn't know that the river had these things called rapids. Kind of like life. Like I didn't know, like as a perfectionist, I didn't really know that people had problems. I just thought everybody was perfect. And so I got on the river, and the my guide said, when we get to the rapids, and I was like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like, what have I done? And so I ended up, the short of it is that I ended up falling into the river on the third on a class 2 rapid. And for the first time in my life, I didn't hyperventilate. And so I went to lunch to celebrate my 40th birthday and to celebrate that didn't die. And I decided that I was going to stand up paddleboard across Lake Powell. I had been on Powell before. I had never been on all of it. I really I didn't have a paddleboard. I didn't even have a paddle. Like I didn't like it was just sort of ridiculous. And it really the reason for it is in hindsight is that I did what I always did to prove my worth, which is I set out to achieve something. And so my mom decided to come with me, and we did some trial runs, which were really helpful on Lake Powell. And we set out in November of 2015 together to cross Lake Powell, which is a reservoir, the second largest reservoir in the United States, on the Utah-Arizona border, near kind of like southern Utah, southeastern Utah, and northern Arizona. And so it's about 140, I think it was either 141 or 144 miles, something like that.
It's a really beautiful lake.
Oh, yeah, it's stunning.
Yeah.
So we started at a place called North Wash Dirty Devil Takeout, which is a launch area. It's just north of Height, Utah, and we planned on 14 days. And it was remarkable. I saw where the Colorado River met the reservoir, and that was really profound transformational experience for me on the first day. And then when we got into camp the first night, I dumped my solar battery charger and my iPhone in the water. And I didn't have backup. And so that was my first problem. We got into some wind on the second day. We got stuck on an island, which was super fun we paddled for like 2 hours and got stuck on an island for hours overnight. And then we had the absolute most glorious day of my life on day 3. It was like being in a dream.
So wait, can you pause? Can we just pause
Yeah.
and tell me about that day? Why was it like a dream?
Yeah. Well, so we weren't sure, like there were some conflicting reports about weather. Like we weren't sure if we were getting into weather or coming out of it. And so we started the day with a little bit of wind, but then we rounded this one corner by Castle Butte in kind of around, I'm blanking on the bay right now. Was it Blue Notch? I'm blanking on the bay. It was it was just north of Good Hope Bay, which is appropriate. And everything just settled. And it was like you couldn't tell the lake from the sky. the clouds were reflecting. We couldn't tell if we were moving or not because it was just so peaceful and so serene. And there were, it was very little sound other than my mom and I just paddling and the water dripping into the lake and watching the light go from butte to butte. And the way I describe it as my book is it felt like Thomas Moran was sitting there and painting the landscape to life right in front of our eyes. And so it was just one of those moments where it was probably one of the very first times where I was completely absorbed in the moment, where I wasn't worried about my past. I wasn't concerned or worried about my future. And again, from a perfectionist perspective, that was incredibly freeing. And, keep in mind when we go to nature, especially, and this is how I felt in Lake Powell, is I was in a place where I didn't feel like there was any expectations of me. I was in a place where the ravens didn't care what I smelled like. They didn't care what I looked like. I was so free of society expectations. And I was really fighting in that time, being alone. Like, how were people going to treat me as a, potentially a divorced woman? And how was I going to make it as an independent woman? And would I even? And so like I had a lot of emotional burdens coming into that trip anyway. And so it was, most of that day. And the scenery alone, to go in Lake Powell, where you get like sort of a constricted canyon and then it opens up into bays. It's almost like it's breathing, it just sort of pulses as you go down as you continue down the channel. And so it was remarkable.
You have photographs from this
I
time?
do.
And when you look at them, I'm just curious, what happens when you look back at them? Like this is, I feel like we're on another tangent. We'll go back. What happens when you look at those now? Because I assume that some of them, did you put photographs in your book?
Yeah, so there'll be 76 photographs in my book. The book is 352 pages, but it's 76 photographs. And so, yeah, it's, it's, I mean, it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I mean, it changed everything. It changed my course. The river changed my course. And, we'll get into it, but we didn't end up finishing. And not finishing was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so, I think when I look back, a lot of people are like, are you planning to go retry the trip? Are you, I don't try to go recreate that moment. I just kind of really appreciate it for what it is and what it was and how meaningful it was to be out there with my mother, how remarkable it was to feel that free. And I think since that time, I've been trying to keep that freedom, right? Keep that spirit of freedom, releasing expectations and, perfectionism and control and all of those, negative narratives and things like that, just trying to keep that as preserved as possible. And so the photographs, I think now just serve as a reminder to me of that's possible. And that's for me, that's the end goal in terms of my mental state.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I love having these experiences and looking back on photographs and knowing the transformation that was taking place. And I mean, truthfully, other people see whatever they want from it, but they don't really know. That's why we hold them a little precious, don't we?
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point, it feels like lifetimes ago. Like it just feels so, yeah, it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Fun to look back at. The ones that are not fun are from day 4.
Okay. Let's hear about that now. We came full circle. We tangented or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So day 4, we started off with a tailwind. We went extra mileage because we were quote behind and we had a gorgeous day and it was like, we don't want to stop. Like, this is just too good. It's too good. And this is me, like more, always more, like can't be satisfied, more, always more. And so, we ended up in a very narrow, section of the river, where stopping was not going to necessarily be feasible. There's lots of sheer cliffs. Since the reservoir has risen, there's not a lot of, sand and there's not a lot of places to, escape if you needed to. And so we started with a tailwind. We were very excited because we had been fighting headwinds. And so tailwind, like, woo, we're going to crush this. And so we rounded a corner around a place called Tapestry Wall. And the trouble with trouble is it starts off as fun, as the quote goes. And so I basically, for the next 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours, watched my mom almost die. She was bouncing her kayak we got in 4 to 5 foot swells, and her kayak she didn't have any control. I didn't have any control over my paddleboard. And so we were kind of at the mercy of the river. And thankfully, thankfully the river decided that we were going to live. And so, we couldn't go back upstream. We couldn't go downstream. We just had to get through it. And I think that's another life metaphor, is that sometimes we face these things and you just got to go with the flow, and you can give into your situation, but you cannot give up. And so I watched my mother in the most incredible display of courage. She's bouncing off the cliff wall. She's trying, almost getting sucked into holes in the wall. And she's trying with all her might to get into the center of the channel, and it's not working. And I'm like trying to figure out how to stay on my paddleboard, and it's inflatable. And if I get next to the wall, it's going to pop, and I'm going to drown, and she's going to drown. And I mean, it just like it was, after day 3, which was the most peaceful day of my life, to go into this, it was one of the most chaotic moments of my life. And so we ended up in a place called Forgotten Canyon, and we couldn't find a camp. We couldn't find a place to land. There was a little spit of sand that it was like, let's just rest. In Forgotten Canyon, there was a floating toilet, and I figured, worst case scenario, we'll just put our sleeping bags on the floating toilet, and it's flat and it's safe, and we'll figure it out. Right. My mom was going into hypothermia. She was in shock. And as I was boiling tea, we heard a boat come into the canyon, and it happened to be a National Park Service police rescue boat. And so my mom and I decided to cut our trip short. Day 4, we were supposed to be 14 days, and we caught a ride. We got basically rescued from Forgotten Canyon, all because the gentleman needed to come in and go to the bathroom. He didn't know we were in the canyon. He just had to go to the bathroom. And we just happened to be right by the floating toilet. And so
thank goodness.
So we took a ride back to Hall's Crossing, and that was the end of the trip. And it was the start of my mental journey. And so, as I write in the book, the wind and the waves had just begun once we got home. And so I unraveled. My head exploded. Having 2 back-to-back, quote again, failures, in 8 months' time was too much for a perfectionist brain to handle. And so I ended up unraveling my inner narrative, comparison to others, feeling gratitude. There's just a whole slew of things, how to have fun. Like, what does that even mean? What is fun to me? And so there's a whole kind of unraveling. And then my mom and I end up getting back together, and we're doing our first Grand Canyon trip. And I realize I have all of these realizations about what my purpose is in life because of the river and because of these experiences that I've had. And it is super ironic that the person who is terrified of water for 40 years is now like my joy and my delight, and my purpose is to bring people to the Colorado River. And so I lead workshops and all of that. Everything that I do now pretty much involves some form of water. And so I end the story. I end the book. Well, I'm not going to tell you the
Don't
end,
spoil it.
I'm not spoiling the end, but I do end up crossing Lake Mead on my paddleboard. It took 9 days. I did 6 days alone, and I had some mishaps there too. But I think throughout the entire process, what I learned is that the waves of life don't stop. And even if you're perfect, even if you're trying to control them, you cannot control everything that happens in your life, but you can control how you respond to them. And you can choose, you can choose productive ways and non-productive ways. And I definitely transformed from non-productive ways of handling, crises and hardship to, kind of just rolling with it. And going with the flow is a very cliche saying, and it was actually the original title of the book. But it's about going with that flow of life and finding your own flow to embrace. And so that was the long of it. I don't even remember what the question was.
I don't even know if there was a question. So
But
I
there
was like,
it is. There you
I
have
said,
it.
tell me about that trip. And you did.
There it is. Yeah.
So there it is.
So there you have it.
Well, you know what's so interesting is, thank you for all of that. I'm want to read
Yeah.
this book now.
Well, good. That's the whole idea.
If y'all are interested in reading this book now, I mean, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's so interesting. I remember maybe a few years ago, I remember listening to you and you were talking about your artist in residency in Acadia, and like
Mm.
hearing this about you, like you live in Arizona where it's warm, you go to places a lot where it's warm. Like I know you go to Death Valley. I mean, these aren't all warm places, but it's so interesting. I remember listening to a story from you from Acadia in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, what month was that? Like how many? So you've done 3.
Well, I've done 3 artist in residencies. My
Okay.
first was November '09, then it was October 10, and then it was January, February 13.
That sounds cool.
And so, yeah. Yeah, it was funny. So Acadia is actually where I connected photographically with
Mm.
water. So I was still terrified of water where I couldn't see my feet, but Acadia was the reason, my residencies were the reason why I was like, I really think I need to explore this more because I really love water. I was the park's first winter residence. And so when the coordinator asked if I wanted to do it, I was like, Kate, you do know that I don't own a coat. I'm from Arizona. And so it was kind of funny. But yeah, it was decidedly decidedly colder in January, February than it is in Arizona. So, but awesome.
Right. Yeah. I'm just curious. I have one more question after this, but I'm just curious. Like, I don't always have fun when I'm really, really cold. Because I'm like,
Understandable.
I am freezing. How do I photograph? My hands are cold. I am like, especially if there's like snow involved or I'm wet in some way, like this, it's all the things. And so I want to know, what was the time that it was most cold? No, that was the coldest, but you had the most fun. This is what I'm asking. This is a personal question, obviously, because I want to know if it's possible to have fun photographing while you're cold if you live in somewhere warm.
It is, Brie. I am here to tell you that it is. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that you're dressed for it, you're ready for it, and that we talk about not having expectations, but this would be the time where you're like, well, I might expect to be a little bit uncomfortable, and so long as I'm not getting frostbite, like I'm probably okay. Like, we must suffer for our art. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I think the best story that came out of my third residency with winter, at least sort of my experience with Maine winter, was that they had a nor'easter blow through, and I grew up half of my childhood in Chicago. So I know snow and I know blizzard. I get that. But like I wasn't sure what was going to happen with a nor'easter. And, all of the preparation was like everybody is leading Scudic, they're leaving Scudic Peninsula. Nobody's going to be, on the peninsula, just you. And like maybe the maintenance guy, but make sure you have bread and peanut butter and bottled water and I mean they were really trying to prepare me as if like the apocalypse was going to happen, and I do understand that that's extraordinarily critical if you lose power and you lose heat and all of that. And so like I had hand warmers stashed, I had flashlights, I was ready for like I at least I thought I was ready for it. Yeah, well, I was. And then so the next day, the height of this storm blew in at the height of king tides. And so I had this feeling that it was going to be kind of off the hook. And they were talking about like roads being, flooded, and they were. And like just like crazy town. Especially for someone from Arizona, where we don't like deal with any of this. And so I remember waking up the next morning and I was like, I still have power. My clock's not blinking. Like, I had power all night. I still have heat. Like, this is amazing. And I'm eating my oatmeal and I'm watching this like 4-foot snowdrift against my door, my windows building up. And I was like, the Wabanaki Indians didn't have this fancy studio apartment to be warm in. They just lived outside. Like they know how to do this. And so I was like, I'm not really in the nor'easter. I wonder what it would be like to be in the nor'easter. And so I put on every piece of clothing that I owned, that I had in in my suitcase. I mean, I put everything on. I put 3 layers of long johns. I had the snow pants on. I had the puffy, the down jacket. I had 3 hats and I picked one lens at the time I was shooting Canon. I took my 100 to 400 and I put it in its, rain gear, like I mean, it's howling out there. It's howling, it's snowing. And I'm like, oh yes, we're going to the point and we're going to see what it's like to be in a nor'easter. And I mean, it is the clearest definition of awe I have ever experienced outside. It was both the most incredible thing I've ever seen and perhaps one of the most terrifying, just to feel the pulse of the water hitting. I mean, the booming nature of the waves against the cliff, or you could feel it in the ground. And they had clocked like 85-mile-an-hour winds, just right offshore from where I was. And so, I mean, I could barely stand up. And so I was getting blown down. I would stand up. I was getting blown down. I would stand up. And then it was one of my very first experiences where I created meaning first and then made the photograph. I looked over at these trees and I was like, oh, how are these trees taking this? Like, this is my first nor'easter and I'm getting destroyed. Like, these trees are absolutely, like, they've done this before and they're amazing and they're persistent and why, like, how do I be that? And then I raised my camera and made a few images. I didn't make a whole lot of it, but I walked back to the studio, the comfort and warmth of my studio apartment. And it was so exhilarating. It was almost like it's type 2 fun, right? Like type 1 fun is where you're having fun in the moment and it's hilarious. And then type 2 fun is where you have this like kind of maybe not the best experience. Like maybe things aren't going right. And then you look back and you're like, that was awesome. Right. Like, so, I would I do it again? Absolutely. Do I? Yeah, I do. I go out it doesn't matter because nothing's going to be worse than an 85-mile-an-hour nor'easter now. Right. So like I found, I didn't find the end limit. I still haven't found the end limit yet of what I can tolerate. So it's like, well, I can do that, then I can be okay having a little bit of fun when it's raining a little bit. Like, so I think, I don't know that was the most amazing photograph I've ever made in my life, but it sure gave me confidence to go out and whether that's maybe not exactly the most comfortable. And you just get dressed with it. I mean, I definitely celebrated with some hot chocolate after that. And I mean, what's more fun than hot chocolate? So
I know, right? Yeah. I hope you had whipped cream. I'm on this. I listen, I love all that because I'm picturing myself going, yeah, I'm going to try that. And I probably would. And that would be type 3 fun for me. So I'm on this group chat.
Off the charts.
Yes. So I am on this group chat. So I'm going next month to South Africa to hike the Drakensbergs.
Wow.
So Murray Livingston, he lives in Scotland, but he's from South Africa. And anyway, he put together a group and I'm the only woman. But I'm on this group chat with like 5 other dudes. Right. So one of them posts how they're camping. Jeff posts how he's camping, in the snow. And I'm like, he said, this was type 2 fun. And I said, that is not my kind of type 2 fun. And he says, it might be type 3. I don't know if that's a thing. And then this other guy, I think George, anyway, he says, I found it. It's on REI, type 3 fun. And here's the definition of type 3 fun. Type 3 fun is not fun at all.
Period. The end.
Period. The end. It's a thing, but it's not fun. Like I'm like camping in the snow is definitely my type 3 fun. So
Well, and we all have to find our fun, right? Like, and
right.
everybody can have different definitions of it. And so, yeah, that's so
Oh my gosh.
funny.
And you know what I love about you, Colleen, is you're like,
Oh,
yeah, I have fun. And I think a lot, like, I think throughout this whole conversation, a lot of what we heard is like, you haven't said this directly, but I hear your brain going, wouldn't it be fun if
oh yes.
I tried doing that? Wouldn't it be fun if I got a paddleboard and went across, like whatever? Wouldn't it be fun if? And to be honest, a lot of my things, crazy things that I do start with, wouldn't it be fun if? And it's like one of my favorites. And I love finding the fun, even though it doesn't necessarily like, I'm like, wait a minute, maybe that isn't fun. But then
But
it's
you
all
never know until you try,
no,
right?
and the thing is like if you think it is going to be fun, then it is. So
Yeah, we can control our response, right? Yeah.
absolutely. So this is what I was saying earlier is I love that you love to have fun, and I love that you have this blog called Dear Bubbles,
Yeah.
and it's
Speaking
just
of what if, wouldn't it be fun?
wouldn't it be
Speaking
fun?
of, wouldn't it
I
be fun if I started an advice column like Dear Abby? That's
right,
exactly how that started. That's
right.
exactly how that started.
Oh, is that how it? I was going to ask you how that started. So it's like,
It's
Dear Abby,
exactly that's it. That's it.
and where did Bubbles come from?
Oh, well, Bubbles is one of my many, many nicknames.
Was that from when you were
um,
younger or something? Or
No, that's actually from like 2014, 2015 from the Moab Photo Symposium. I love photographing bubbles, so that was part of it, but it's part of my personality and there's some other reasons for it. But yeah, that's the bulk of it. And so, I mean, how absolutely ludicrous, ridiculous is it to be like Dear Bubbles? Like, and I was dying and then I'm like, but why not? And so like, here we are, like what, like 3-4 years later, like 90 some columns later,
I
like, and
know,
it's still
and
going.
right, and you can subscribe to these too. We'll put a link to all of them in there, so
Awesome.
you can
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I subscribe. They're fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing, right? Is that we're learning, we're growing, we're asking questions. It's the curiosity, right? Curiosity is near and dear to my heart. And so asking questions and what if is like, I think one of the most powerful questions you can ask in photography and in life. I mean, there's very little consequences of failing at this point. I mean, if you think
True.
about like failing as a photograph, right? Like what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to have a bad picture on your memory card, like
Oh
delete it.
no.
Like they put the delete button on the back of your camera for a reason, right? So, but there's little consequence. I mean, if you're bungee jumping and skydiving, maybe you want to be a little bit more precise about things, but like, like those things can kill you. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, I guess this goes back to what we were talking earlier about sort of the narrative. It's like, what do you want to do? Like, what is in your head? What is in your imagination? And how can you make the most of it? And so, and to have fun, to grow. I mean, yeah,
I know it's
yeah.
so good. Having fun is amazing. It's my favorite.
Well, it's pretty delicious, right?
I know
So,
it totally is. And you know what? It just makes life more interesting when I'm like, oh, let me just try this. It's going to be fun to just try. Like that's it.
yeah,
If I just decide there's no, it's okay. So, okay. So
yeah,
you told us a bunch about So Said the River, your book. So we're going to put
yeah.
links to that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Can you just talk really quickly about empowering women? This is what I love about this podcast is we get to
yeah,
come on and, talk and share experiences and also invite people to come do things with us. And I love that you do these photography, like, do you call them workshops? Well, I'll let you tell about them.
yeah. So I teach co-ed workshops, but I also teach all women's workshops, and they are called Sheography. And what I am hoping to do with that is give women a safe and supportive environment to learn how to travel on their own, how to feel confident in expressing themselves. I wasn't an outdoors girl before. I wasn't like until 1997. I was my early 20s and I
Same.
didn't have a, yeah, I mean, so like who teaches us how to do that if you don't have friends, you don't have people in your community that are outdoorsy and you're maybe curious about it, but you're terrified of it. I mean, I was terrified of the woods, like water, of course, but I was also like, the woods is where scary things happen. Right. And so ironically, because I actually, I grew up on a creek and forest, but anyway, I grew up hearing society tell me that the woods are where scary things happen. And sometimes they do, but
Wait. It's when you're alone in the woods.
oh yeah, that's even worse, right?
Right.
Women should not be
You
alone in the
should not be
woods
alone.
after
Right.
dark too. Like, right? Like, so yeah, so we have this messaging. And so, I was very fortunate to have friends that supported, very outdoorsy. My ex-husband was very outdoorsy. And so I had a lot of very positive influences on that. And so I started becoming very comfortable to the point where, I left my job, right? Like, I mean, like I left corporate America and the safe haven of a cube to spend almost all of my time outside. And so I started teaching workshops, and to do that, you've got to be comfortable with your place, the places, you have to know them quite well. So I had spent a lot of time on my own in these places. But then also I started teaching all women's workshop for becoming outdoor woman. And I started noticing that women were reacting and responding differently when they were amongst themselves. And it wasn't better, it wasn't worse, it was just different. And they were asking different questions, their confidence level changed, in some cases even just their whole demeanor was different. And so I thought, again, wouldn't it be fun to start all women's workshops? And it has become a way to celebrate women in the outdoors. And like I said, some people, when we first started these, had never traveled by themselves before on an airplane. I mean, that's amazing. Like, and so to just do that is, it's about the photography and whatnot, but just to enable those experiences where women understand how to get on a plane, how to get in a car, how to cross the country, how to plan, how to be safe in doing these things and feel comfortable, traveling by yourself and then being among women, it's just such an inspirational thing. Everybody is so supportive and helping each other. And, the amount of questions in the women's groups is just, they just keep flowing, and it's so much fun. So that's, I wanted to kind of be the role model a little bit from my background, like, hey, there's no magic to this. You just do it. And
Yep.
like, and
Exactly.
just, you kind of just have to plow through the fear and you just do it. And we'll be on the receiving side. Like, we'll be here, to help and to guide you and whatnot. And so for me, it's very, very fulfilling to enable that. And I want to continue doing that, especially, in the years ahead, where I want people to live a meaningful life. And for a lot of women, that doesn't always include the outdoors. It doesn't always include photography. And, fortunately, we're seeing, an influx of women in the outdoors, women in photography. And so I want to facilitate as much of that as possible so that people have these remarkable experiences and want it to be part of their life. And so, yeah, it's really a privilege and an honor to be facilitating the geographies. They're very, very, very fulfilling to me.
I've seen you do some in some like you kind of do a diverse, not smattering, but you do diverse workshops.
Yeah, I'm definitely educational based. I am
Yeah,
not.
that's
I
not a
am not a
tour. It's definitely
photographer.
not a
Yeah,
tour.
I am much more into creative expression,
Hmm.
and so no, mine are very educational focused. But
I
yeah,
know
I got my fingers in a lot of things.
right? I remember you did one in New Mexico that was Georgia O'Keeffe focused. And that is so that like, I was like, oh, that's so fun. I want to do that.
Oh, I'm still doing that. That's one of my most popular workshops. Georgia's story.
I know.
Her paintings are remarkable, but she's like the epitome of a strong woman. She was
Hmm.
married once to Alfred Stieglitz, the famous photographer out in New York City. And her story is just so inspirational. And yeah. So I run that every year, and it's definitely a highlight for me.
It's awesome. That's awesome. I love it so
Yeah.
much. Well, Colleen, I feel like we can tell stories for the rest of the day.
I know. We could. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much, Brie. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing. And I really can't wait to read all of the amazing and vulnerable experiences and all of the awful in your book.
Well, hopefully it makes things more joyful for folks. Like that's
Yeah, I think so. All right.
yeah.
Thanks again, Colleen.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
I'm waving.
Come with me on my next adventure. Be a wild woman and join me on one of my small group photography escapes in places like the cypress swamps of East Texas or White Sands, New Mexico. Go to wildwomanphotography.com for all the details. While you're there, you can check out featured wild women, episode transcripts, and more. Oh, and I'd love for you to support this podcast and all these incredible wild women in photography by leaving a review or sharing with a friend. Thank you so much for listening.